Hey guys, so much has been happening within the last 24 hours. I've got pages and pages of notes in front of me. I seriously doubt that I will be able to get to all of this because I don't want the video to be too long, because most people have a pretty short attention span, but I'm gonna try to cover as much of this as I can. This is just mind-blowing to me, the stuff that I have been coming across. And to those of you who have questioned my sources, someone had asked me if the only thing that, no, someone had asked me why I was only using mainstream media sources as my source of information. That is not true. I have actually been using many, I would say dozens of sources. I have been on websites and blogs and Twitter feeds, Facebook, you name it, all over the place. So I don't know why someone would get that impression. I guess because when I did quote some of the sources, they were mainstream, but I'm using a variety of sources, and it has been my experience that the independent news sources actually break stories before the mainstream ones do. And I would imagine that's because the mainstream ones have to be very careful about the source of the information. They probably have to check, double check, triple check before they release something, because then if it's wrong, imagine how embarrassing that would be. And I'm sure that's probably gonna happen to me too at some point, because I am using some independent sources. There is always a chance that they could be erroneous with some of the facts that they're coming forth with. So just keep that in mind. Alright, so what's happening? Nina Pham, which was the first nurse that was diagnosed with Ebola that had been treating Thomas Duncan, she has been transferred to the NIH, the National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. Last I heard, she was in good condition, and now she's even doing videos and tweeting and saying that, you know, telling everybody she's doing great. So thank God, you know, she is doing well. However, I did read that her boyfriend has developed Ebola-like symptoms, and her boyfriend and her parents both work at Alcon, which is an ophthalmological pharmaceutical company, and an email was circulated by the CEO of that company stating that Nina Pham's boyfriend, which I don't have his name, has experienced Ebola-like symptoms and is now being treated in a hospital. And also it didn't say what hospital. But yeah, so that's sad news, but not entirely unexpected considering, you know, the circumstances. A second possible Ebola case in Spain. A plane was isolated at the Madrid airport for an Ebola check after a passenger was reported to have fever and chills. So that patient, well, that passenger is now a patient at a hospital being tested for Ebola. And yesterday there was a congressional hearing, and they were trying to determine, the House was trying to determine, you know, exactly what was going on with this whole Ebola thing, and they were questioning the CDC director, Thomas Friedman, and they were questioning some medical personnel, trying to get as much information as they can about where we are at with this and what is going on. And basically, I think they were looking for some accountability with all the mistakes that have been made and continue to be made. And I don't have cable TV, so I wasn't able to watch any of that coverage, but I was able to get, you know, a little bit of information about it. And yeah, it's such a sad situation that we're in, because I keep seeing mistakes being made and continuing to be made, that to just a regular person that is an observer of all this, that it seems like there are so many obvious things that with mistakes that are being made. For example, when Nina Pham was being transferred, did any of you see the footage from that where there were all these people with hazmat suits wheeling her to the plane, and then there was just some random guy standing there with a clipboard that had no protective gear on whatsoever? I mean, what? Why? And I think one of you even mentioned that in the comment section of yesterday's video. It's like, I don't know. It just seems like there's so many obvious mistakes being made that have no logic behind them. Okay, and I also wanted to address something that I had talked about in yesterday's video, where the president was saying in his press conference that he was kissing and hugging some of the nurses from the Emory Hospital in Atlanta. And I wasn't sure at that time whether any patients had been there before that had Ebola, and yes, there had been 2 patients treated with Ebola at that hospital prior to the president's visit. So what was he thinking? I mean, I understand why he did it and everything, but it just seems to me like an unnecessary risk. I mean, he's the president of the United States, you know. I think that it would be a good idea to keep him safe and not risk any contamination like that, but his choice. Okay, so let's see, what else is going on? This is something that broke originally on an independent news source that is now being picked up by mainstream media. Texas-based Carnival Magic cruise ship stuck at sea with 4,633 passengers and Dallas healthcare worker with Ebola symptoms. They wanted to dock in Belize. Belize said no. Belize is a Central American country. So Belize Prime Minister Dean Barrow has told the U.S. State Department the cruise ship will not be allowed to port. Dallas healthcare worker who did lab work for patient Thomas Duncan is on board exhibiting Ebola symptoms. Again, just like with the whole Nurse Vincent situation getting on a commercial airline, what was this person thinking getting on a cruise ship? I mean, I know that life goes on for these people that have these jobs, but can you at least put your flights and your cruises on hold for a month in order to just be on the safe side and not contaminate and infect the whole world? I mean, I'm sorry, maybe I'm not looking at this from the right perspective, but I just feel like we need to be more cautious. Okay, and let's see, what else have we got? There is some controversy about the temperature cutoff point, about what would be considered an Ebola symptom and what would not be. There's a lot of numbers being thrown around with this. 100.4 is the temperature that they had been using as a cutoff point for what would indicate that you have Ebola. When Amber Vinson got on that plane, she had a temperature of 99.5. I would think at this point that, you know, if 98.6 is considered normal, then maybe we need to lower that temperature cutoff point just to be on the safe side. You know, let's be extra careful with this. Some people are saying that it might be a good idea to have what they're calling an Ebola czar, someone who is overseeing this entire epidemic aside from the head of the CDC, you know, somebody that will just be overseeing everything, taking control of the situation and laying down some ground rules and precautions. And I guess the president is considering this, and I think that's a good idea. You know, the more people we have putting their input into this, the better. I think if we had a Surgeon General, maybe that would have been a good person to take charge of it, but since we don't, let's appoint somebody. It couldn't hurt at this point. And I wanted to address also some of the things that have been written in the comment section that I feel like have been misunderstood in regards to things that I may have said in some of these videos. I can see how that would happen because when you listen to what people have to say, sometimes you misconstrue their words. There was a comment in regards to one of the first videos that I did where I was talking about a possible way to find a cure for this, in the sense that anyone who has had this has developed antibodies in their blood. And I was saying that there are at least hundreds of people in Africa who have had this disease and survived and recovered, and maybe we could make some sort of medicine or a vaccine from the antibodies in their blood or their actual blood. And somebody somehow construed that to mean that I had said that I didn't care about the people in Africa or how this has affected them, and how arrogant was I to make a statement like that, and that all I cared about was Americans and that I wanted to use Africans' blood to treat Americans. I never said any of that. Okay, you need to not read more into what I'm saying than what I'm actually saying. If I have something to say, I'm going to say it, but please don't misconstrue my words or anything like that. When I said what I did, I meant develop a medicine or vaccine to treat everyone, not just Americans, but anybody who has been affected by the Ebola virus. And I absolutely do have compassion for the people of Africa. As a matter of fact, what I would like to do is post a link to another video from the perspective of someone in Africa who has had this disease and has lost family members, and it's basically what it's like to be someone who's had the disease and recovered, and you know, they're trying to go on with their life at this point. It was a really great video that was posted by the World Health Organization, and I would like to put a link to that in my description box so that any of you that are interested can watch it. It has subtitles on it because the woman who's speaking doesn't speak English, but it was, I thought, a really moving, profound video that shows you what it's like for people who are battling this from basically ground zero in the Ebola crisis. So don't think that I don't have compassion for people outside of this country, because of course I do. You know, I'm a human being. I'm not so closed-minded that I don't realize how devastating it must be for the people of these nations that are suffering with this on a much grander scale than what we are. And I would also like to address comments that were made in some recent videos that have basically said that there are a lot of things going on in the world besides the Ebola crisis, and why am I focusing every single video on this? And to answer that question, I would say absolutely there are other things going on in the world. I am very concerned about the situation at the nuclear power plant in Japan. They're trying to build a wall of ice to hold back and contain the highest level of radiated water at that plant that has existed since their original crisis began. I mean, this is very scary stuff, and I am deeply concerned about the people that are pretty much putting their lives at risk to try to contain all this. I mean, this is a bad, bad situation, people. I really don't like or feel safe with nuclear power as a source of energy. I just think it's way too dangerous, but it's here and we have to try to deal with it as best we can. But ever since they experienced that major typhoon last year, that nuclear power plant has just been a ticking time bomb, basically. You know, they're just trying to contain all that contaminated waste that's there from escaping into the ocean, the atmosphere, the world. So yeah, there's another story that I'm very concerned about. But the reason why I'm focusing on the Ebola crisis is because that is something that is affecting people in the here and now. I will possibly shift over to other stories as they become more relevant to my space and my universe, because let's face it, we all see things from the perspective of our own eyes, in our own situation, at our own time. And another reason why I'm focusing on the Ebola crisis to the exclusion of other stories right now is because I feel that this is just the beginning. I hope I'm wrong, but I really feel like we are just getting started with this thing, and because it is being grossly mismanaged and we're just letting people get on planes and cruise ships and going on with their lives like nothing has ever happened or has happened, I think this is just the beginning. Too many people have been exposed at this point. Something is going on with the virus itself, because this virus is not anything new. It has been around now for over 4 decades. So why is it all of a sudden gaining the strength that it has gotten? I'm sure you've all seen the quote, over 10,000 new cases are being diagnosed in the African nations that have been affected by this every week. And that number is expected to continue. We have sent U.S. troops, and now we are in the process of sending National Guard to these nations to try to contain it, stop it from spreading any worse than it already has. When those people come back, are we going to quarantine them, or are we just going to send them right back home to their families? And so I don't know. I just feel like this whole thing has been grossly mismanaged, and we really need to take extra precautions, you know. Let's not just do things in what we consider to be a safe manner, but we need to take this 10 steps further than we need to in order to protect the planet, basically. Not just the United States, but everyone in every country can and I think will be affected by this. I hope I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. If you go back a few years ago, anybody remember the bird flu, the avian flu? I was convinced after watching a documentary about that on TV that it was gonna sweep the planet and that everybody was gonna end up dying of bird flu. Thank God I was wrong. I never talked about that in any of my videos. That was just something that I experienced personally. I mean, I didn't get the flu, but what I mean is that was just an opinion that I had at that time. I was convinced that this thing was going to wipe out the planet, but thank God it did not. Not really sure what happened there, or I guess it didn't develop the way they expected it to, but I hope I'm wrong, people. If I'm not wrong, this is just the beginning of what is going to happen with this Ebola. I believe personally it is going to spread and become a pandemic. I hope I'm wrong, but just in case I'm not, like I mentioned in yesterday's video, it might not be a bad idea to buy a few extra things when you do your regular shopping, and make sure that you have plenty of things that you need that are important. And yeah, just, you know, use some common sense where this is concerned. You might want to just, you know, get prepared and get some things that you need, or you might need if the situation worsens. And you know, it's not a bad idea to stock up on things that you use all the time anyway, because all kinds of things can happen in life. You know, you might get the flu, or you might get sick, and then it wouldn't be so easy to go to the store. But yeah, just, you know, take some extra steps and precautions, and get ready. Pray for the best, but prepare for the worst. I think that's a good policy to have. Well, that's it for today, you guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.